Support for this podcast comes from Frito-Lay and the 2023 Snack Bracket Championship. The Frito-Lay Snack-It Challenge is underway, and fans are voting on their favorite snacks to crown champion. We're talking about prime-time matchups between the best 64 snacks in the land. Will Ruffles Ridges reign supreme? Can Doritos defend their dynasty? Or will Smart Food use their smarts for a surprise upset? Only you can decide. Get in on all the action for a chance to win up to $1,000 or a year's worth of snacks. Let your snacks be heard. Just go to fritolaysnacket.sbnation.com to vote and enter for a chance to win. No purchase necessary. Sweepstakes ends April 3rd, 2023. Void where prohibited. Year's worth of snacks awarded in the form of 52 coupons, each good for one bag of chips. See official rules at fritolaysnacket.sbnation.com.
Good evening, Night fans. Welcome to a, this is not an emergency edition of the
Yeah, you got to stop using that term. You got to stop using that term. We got to come up with something better than emergency.
Well, NASA. Okay, so I think this is like one step below an emergency. NASA calls it a contingency. So let's call it a contingency podcast. This is the Black and Gold Banneret Podcast. I'm Jeff Sharon. He's Eric Lopez. What a week! What a Wednesday we have lined up for UCF. We're going to talk about men's basketball with the victory on the road in hostile territory at Illinois State, coming back from down big in the first half. The Knights, with 2 free throws by B.J. Taylor, knock off the 1 seed in their bracket in the NIT, and the Knights have one last home game in the quarterfinals against Illinois coming up on Wednesday night. And then we're also going to preview softball with a big game of their own against Florida State at the UCF Softball Complex. That game's at 5:30 on Wednesday. Number 1 team in the nation, Florida State, paying a visit to the Knights tomorrow night. So the big UCF sports doubleheader, softball at 5:30, basketball at 7. Make sure you log on to blackandgoldbanneret.com for the latest on our podcast. Make sure you also follow us on Twitter at UCF_Banneret, as well as subscribe to this podcast on iTunes, Google Play, SoundCloud, and TuneIn. You can follow me at Jeff_Sharon. You can follow Eric at Eric Lopez Elo. And let's just dive right in here. Wow, Eric, how about this night's basketball team? After the win over Colorado, you go up to Illinois State. You're playing the 1 seed in your bracket, the 1-4. And I thought that this game, I know I'm not the only one. Illinois State jumped out on top early, had the home crowd going. It was a really hostile environment. Give them credit. Redbird Arena, Doug Collins Court. Boy, they brought the pain in that game in the early going. The Redbirds jumped out early to, I believe it was a 17-3 lead at one point.
Well, they led by 18-2 at one point. Yeah, it was a tough start.
Yeah, it was a very, very difficult start for UCF. It was 17-3 after the first 6 minutes and 12 seconds. But UCF just kind of chipped away from that point. And let's see, the largest lead they had, you're right, Eric, it was 18. I believe it was, right there. With 4:02 to go in the first half, it was 33-15. And this was after UCF had already cut it down. They got within 5, and then Illinois State went on a run. It was a 16-3 run to take that 18-point lead. And at that point, I think a lot of people are like, "Oh boy, this might get bad." But something clicked, I think, in that last 4 minutes, where all of a sudden the Knights started making some baskets, and Matt Williams got hot, and A.J. Davis started making shots. They cut it down to within 10 with after a 3 by Matt with 51 seconds to go before the half. And then Illinois State hit a 3. Tony Wills hit one. Then they were up 13 at the break. But I thought at that point, I was like, you know something? We might be down, but we're not. It didn't feel like we were out of this game. And then all of a sudden, the second half happens. And the Knights just chip away and chip away and chip away. And down 10 with 10:56 to go, then they really start cutting into the lead. B.J. Taylor with a couple free throws got it to within 5. B.J. with a 3 before that. B.J. with another jumper after that. That cut it to 3. Taco Fall had a big dunk with about 8.5 to go, and all of a sudden the Knights are within 1. And you're thinking, man, this thing is going to get tight. Illinois State then jumped out again, led by 5 with 5 minutes to go. And then the final sequence happened. Neither team. UCF took a 61-60 lead on a free throw by A.J. Davis with 1:40 to go. They actually tied the game on a jumper by Davis, and it was a 3-point play. So A.J. Makes the free throw to put UCF up 61-60, and that was the Knights' first lead of the game. You had mentioned on Twitter some suspect officiating. I thought that the foul call on B.J. Taylor with 4 seconds left was a good call on the reach-in. But Mikhail McIntosh makes a couple free throws, or excuse me. No, that's right. He makes 2 free throws, and UCF has the ball down 1 with 4 seconds to go. And the big play, B.J. Taylor goes the length of the floor, or right in front of the Illinois State bench, and gets fouled, and makes 2 of what I said earlier today on Twitter with probably the most pressure-packed clutch free throws in UCF basketball history to this point, and gave UCF a 63-62 lead with 1 second to go, and then that was it. Illinois State, got off a shot. It was, from deep. It was a desperation heave, and that's it. UCF at one point down 18 on the road in the NIT is going to the quarterfinals, and the Knights are playing Illinois on Wednesday night. There was a part of me that was surprised at how it came out, and then there was a part of me that really wasn't surprised to see this team sort of peaking at this point. What did you think when you were watching this game?
Yeah, Illinois State hadn't lost in a while there, and there was a lot of emotion in that building because it had already been known prior to tip-off that Illinois would not be able to host the next round, even if they would have beaten Boise State, even though they're the higher seed, because their arena is not available. So for Illinois State, that's a big deal because they don't get a chance to play Illinois. And I mean, think about that.
They're the little brother up there.
Well, yeah,
outside of Chicago.
Right. I mean, it'd be kind of. Imagine if UCF was in a tournament with Florida, let's say, or Florida State, and you find out, hey, they can't host a game, so they got to come to your building if you win this game. Well, that amps it up a little bit. So the environment was set up that way, and I thought the officiating was intimidated by them. I thought at times they let the fans kind of dictate things. You mentioned the suspect of the calls. I thought they were horrific. That the jump ball was ridiculous. It was a premature thing. It was a home cooking call, and I thought it was terrible. And
then you get the call on the final play of the game.
Well, and that was fortunate, but I thought it was a makeup there, and I think the officials at that point figured they just we feel bad. Now we're going to do another call.
That's a hell of a time for a makeup call with 1.4 seconds to go, though.
And that was tough. I didn't like it. I'm a proponent of swallow the whistle. I'm not a fan of the officials. Some people say, well, if it's a foul in the first quarter, it's a foul in the end of the game and all that. My thing is, that's the reason why I want them to swallow the whistle, because they sometimes what happens is officiating at the end of games gets too out of control. Oh, they make one bad call, then they got to feel like they got to make up another call. And then there's 3 calls there. And the B.J. Taylor, I actually do agree he reached in. But I feel like they were waiting to make that call. Even if BJ doesn't reach, I feel like a whistle was going to be called. And then, the BJ Taylor call, I didn't think that was a good call either, to be honest. I didn't think he really.
I was when they blew the whistle, I'll be honest with you, I was shocked because he looked to me like he was out of control heading toward the sideline.
Correct. So, but again, I feel like they were pressured in and really this goes back to, if you remember a few minutes before that, where they had issues at the scoreboard, and Coach Dawkins was upset, and rightfully so, because remember the moment where they announced they would announce the score because the scoreboard wasn't working on the UCF side of the scoreboard, and the television showed that it will only work for Illinois State, which is a big problem because how else is a player supposed to know the situation? And I remember, I think Coach Dawkins was telling, well, why don't you just turn off that scoreboard? Because players are going to get confused, and they didn't turn it off.
Plus, it's, in that situation, they're going to announce the score over the PA system. I got news for you. Ain't no player going to hear that. It's loud as hell in that building.
Correct. It's a fantastic point. So I thought it was terrible. I don't understand why didn't they just stop the game and see if they could at least turn it off if they couldn't fix the issue. We've seen that at UCF home games where there have been maybe an issue. They would take a few minutes to kind of stop it because that's very important.
And so also what they would do is at the scorer's table, and they should have this. I haven't seen it. I haven't seen it actually at the scorer's table readily available, but I've seen this situation before, and we played in the old arena, that when the scoreboard would screw up and they couldn't fix it, they would take out this old thing. It looks like they had it on the set of Hoosiers, the sort of like flip card scoreboard, right? And you have that like a manually operated flip card scoreboard that the official score flips over, just in case that happens.
Right.
So, and I don't know if they didn't have it, or obviously they don't want to have to go to that, but that's at least more effective than announcing the score over the PA, for crying out loud. And this is coming from a guy who does PA.
Yeah, I just thought it was terrible, and thankfully we didn't have a controversial ending from the standpoint of the scoreboard being involved.
Well, I'm sure it was controversial for Illinois State anyway.
Well, I mean, that was a foul call, had no impact as far as the scoreboard situation. I just couldn't believe they allowed that they would play on with the scoreboard showing the incorrect score in situation. I mean, that's as somebody who's talked to a lot of players, I mean, that's a big difference. So fortunately for UCF, they got out of there with the victory, and it's a significant win. I mean, it's a big win for them because now they get an opportunity to host a Big Ten school in an NIT game with the winner going to Madison Square Garden for the Final Four, the NIT. So very significant run for this program, for Coach Dawkins, for UCF. And, I thought UCF again showed really the poise down the stretch. Matt Williams kept them in it. B.J. Taylor made plays. Taco had a big second half defensively. And this team hung in there tough, and it's a great example of the whole year, and they've earned this home game against Illinois, and it'll be fascinating too because it's a quick turnaround. Now UCF got in late Monday morning, but Illinois had to fly to Orlando, so very interesting to see how both teams come out on Wednesday night with the quick turnaround with a lot on the line. But man, what a great win. And I think we spoke about it, in the past, and I've spoken about it actually on the radio this past weekend on the 1080, and that is the exposure that this program got, Jeff, by being on ESPN. I'm sure you were on social media. How many people were tweeting about the UCF game that maybe hadn't tweeted about UCF in a long time, or maybe people that have watched the UCF basketball game haven't watched it in a while?
Well,
significant.
I think there were a couple of things about the environment surrounding the game that bear mentioning. Number one, we got to stand up and give some major kudos to the UCF alumni in the Chicago area who made the trip to Illinois State to cheer on the Knights. There's a solid amount of UCF alums in Chicago. And they never get to see their team play, and to see them come to the game, I thought was really helpful. A quick shout out to shy UCF gal. I didn't see if she was actually at the game, and I'm sorry I didn't see that. But if she was, I mean, goodness, what an experience that must have been. Number two, yes, the exposure on ESPN was critical because they were on across from the UConn women's game. Okay. Now, this is I think key because ESPN's Monday night schedule had there was actually it was UConn women are playing Syracuse, and they went up by 30 or 40, and then that game was pretty much over, right? So the UCF game on ESPN, the men's game, is close. So I'd be interested to see. I don't know if you can get a hold of the ratings numbers. I'd be interested to see what happened with that UCF game in terms of people tuning in over, okay, so, let's check on UConn. Oh, this game's over. All right, well, what's on ESPN? Oh, this game's close. Oh, they have the 7-6 kid. Oh, all right, let's watch this for a little bit. And I think that may have played into a big factor. And there is some news to report leading into the game on Wednesday night. We're recording this Tuesday night. UCF is pushing really hard to sell out this game. And I think that they've had a very good head start on this, due in part at least to that exposure. UCF being, having a quarterfinal game at home. This is the this is the latest in the postseason UCF has had a home game. And it will probably be the latest UCF will ever have a home game in the postseason. I know they got to the CBI semis a few years back. And theoretically, if UCF ever does go back to the CBI, I know that's not ideal if you talk to some of the folks that we know, right? Because you got to pay to get into that tournament. You could theoretically host one or two of the final games in the CBI, depending on home court, because remember they do that best of three for the championship of the CBI. But I think at this point UCF is in a position where, look, we're going to go to the NIT, and you win this game against Illinois, Big Ten opponent. You're going to the Garden, and that's a huge incentive. I mean, obviously incentive, but but wow! All of a sudden, look at what's riding on this game at home, and I think the fans are responding to that, and it should be quite the environment on Wednesday night for this ball game, don't you think?
Yeah. I mean, I think people like to jump on the bandwagon. People are excited about it, and then the way the team has performed. And again,
the bandwagon's here now.
Well, I take a look at the bigger picture. I know people are focused in the immediate and, we need to draw for tomorrow or Wednesday night and the crowd. I'm not as actually too concerned about what they draw on Wednesday night like others are. I mean, I'm more in the big picture, and I think the big picture here is regardless of what happens Wednesday night or beyond, and whatever crowd they draw. Now people are going to be excited about this program. I think that they haven't been in a long time going into the season coming up here in November. And I think you're going to have some buzz going into the start of the season that they haven't had in a while. I think you're going to see a lot of college basketball experts, for example, and people kind of pick UCF as a sleeper for an NCAA tournament team next year. So there's going to be buzz based on the core players that come back for UCF. So there's going to be that buzz. And I think fans that maybe had turned their back on the program, I think will return to some degree. And I think it's about next season. I think that's what I want to know is what they draw next season. And can they get back to consistently drawing, maybe in the 7,000, 8,000, 9,000 range, maybe even depending on what the schedule is. We don't know what the home schedule will look like. But, that's kind of what I look at as the big picture, not the short term. I think people always get caught up in the short term.
Yeah.
But I think this is bigger than Wednesday night. I think it's more about creating that buzz and excitement and interest going into next season. And I'll use the example of that. And I know it's going to come off as I'm biased, but with softball, and you've seen it, the crowds have grown, say, from, I would say 4 or 5 years ago, maybe 2012, 2013, to the present. And part of that was because of the buzz that the 2014 and especially the 2015 team that went 50-9 and ranked 16th in the country and ranked for the first time and won the conference tournament championship at home, which you were at and I was at. Mm-hmm. That during that's when the buzz started happening with softball. Now they're drawing pretty good numbers for, like, for example, a random Friday game that they normally would not have drawn in the past. So that's what I'm looking to see from the men's basketball program moving forward, is to draw that interest next season instead of talking about, wow, they're drawing 35, 4,000. Maybe we're talking about drawing 6 and 7.
Right. I think that's the thing is, like, where does the honeymoon period end? I don't think it's going to I do think that this is going to have some legs next year, because you see how quickly this team has progressed, and and they really are peaking at the right time. And I think that and what I'm really happy to see, and I was thinking about this yesterday watching the game, Matt Williams right now is playing playing out of his mind. He is peaking as a basketball player right before our eyes right now. And it's a shame that it's happening in the final games of his senior season. But if there was ever a good time to do it, it's now. He sparked the rally against Illinois State. And when you see a team that's clicking on all cylinders like they are, I think B.J. Taylor has grown up a lot also in these last couple games. I do think that this is having staying power because we're starting to see the casual fans sit up and take notice once again of UCF basketball. And so to me, that's pretty encouraging. I still want to see, if the rubber meets the road tomorrow night at the arena. I have no reason to suspect that it won't. But this should be a very interesting test, not just of UCF basketball, but of the fan base. And now, hey, let's hit the breaking news hit here, because, Lopez, you just got some of those TV numbers. Go. What do you got?
Well, you asked, right? You asked me what the number was for UCF Illinois State on ESPN, and I just checked. According to TV by the numbers, UCF and Illinois State drew 1.7 million viewers for that basketball game. That is a big number for a Monday.
1.7 million nationwide?
Yep. Keep in mind, that is a big number when you consider it's the competition. It's an NIT game. That is significant number. Remember, it's going up against not only the Monday NBA basketball. You mentioned the women's tournament, but the NBA basketball game, Warriors Thunder, which is a very appealing matchup to a lot of people. I think was actually the number one sporting event that was tuned in at 2.2 million on TNT. Mm-hmm. You also have a television program, Monday Night Raw. WWE is a big television night as well on Monday night for cable television. So to do that number very well is a success. I think it's a major success. And again, think of how many eyeballs that's people watching your product for the first time, maybe for some people. That to me is very significant. And it blew away, by the way, women's basketball. In fact, women's basketball does not even make the top 100 as far as the cable television shows for the day and night. So,
I'm surprised even with UConn playing that it wasn't.
We can get in. Maybe we'll leave that for when we talk softball, because I just think that women's basketball as a whole is in decline in the United States. But here's again the top television programs of the night. Obviously, WWE Raw averages around 3 million viewers for their 3-hour program on USA Network. But as far as other than that, in that time slot, you have the NBA game, and then that UCF game was third.
Wow.
So. Very
is
strong.
That something?
And remember, UCF against Illinois game will be on ESPN2. So Wednesday night, it'll be interesting how they draw there. But that's a positive sign. And again, it shows about the amount of exposure that playing in these tournaments can mean. And especially when you're a tournament that's being aired on that 4-letter network.
Wow. So that's the off the court news. Now let's talk about the on the court situation when we got Illinois coming in, mentioned a Big Ten opponent, and boy, the halcyon days of Darren Williams and Dee Brown and Bruce Weber's fighting Illini teams seem like a long, long time ago now. Illinois finished the regular season at 18-14, 8-10 in the Big Ten, missed the NCAA tournament for the 4th straight year. 10 days ago, on March 11th, they fired their head coach John Gross, and hired and they actually just 3 days ago hired Brad Underwood, the head coach of Stephen F. Austin, or previously a head coach of Stephen F. Austin. 1 year at Oklahoma State, they just hired Underwood to be their new head coach, but. He's not their coach actually at the moment. They got an interim guy actually in there right now. But the Illini are in a state of flux right now. And, man, is this just a strange situation or what? That they now have to go on the road. They're the higher-seeded team. They have to go on the road. UCF is flying back home to play this game. Illinois right now, they just got to 20 wins by defeating Boise State actually in that previous game. But boy, that is a tough situation, for the players for Illinois, where just all kinds of stuff is happening all around them. Meanwhile, they got a game to play.
Yeah, I mean, I'll be honest. I've been surprised that they participated in the NIT to begin with, because usually teams that fire their coaches don't want to participate in the postseason. They kind of want to just move on. But they went ahead, right. And then the second thing, okay, they participated. You figured the players would just kind of go through the motions, but they haven't, to their credit. Illinois is a talented team. With about a week or two left in the regular season, they were kind of they were in that bubble for the NCAA tournament. They were in the conversation, and then they had that devastating loss on the weekend. And I want to say it was like a week before the conference tournament or so. Might have been the last game of the season, actually. They lost to Rutgers on the road, and that kind of killed their chance from a at-large standpoint. And then they got knocked out early in the Big Ten tournament and probably ousted them from that standpoint. And look, I mean, they're looking for the glory days, as you mentioned. I mean, let's not forget Bill Self was there at Illinois. Led him to an Elite Eight before he left for Kansas. Bruce Weber, of course, the national championship game in 2005 with Illinois, as you mentioned, when they lost to North Carolina. That's what they're looking for.
A team that lost 2 games all year.
Yeah, great team, and they're searching for that, and that's why they went after Underwood, who's a very good coach that Stephen F. Austin led him to the NCAA tournament.
Who's an assistant under Frank Martin, too, when Martin was at Kansas State.
Yeah.
Martin now at South Carolina. They just knocked off Duke.
Correct. So that's kind of what's going on with them. But, yeah, they've played well. They've played very well in the NIT, and they're a talented team. No question about it. And UCF will have their hands full. I mean, this is not going to be a cakewalk at all, obviously. I'm trying to think. I mean, this is kind of who would have thought you get Illinois on your court? But this is a team that, having said all the issues they had, that, like I said, they were a week away from being in the conversation. They were in the conversation for the NCAA tournament. When they beat Michigan State, some people thought they were in, but then they kind of blew it, losing to Rutgers. But, this is a talented basketball team in the Big Ten. And clearly motivated. Clearly they're motivated for their interim coach, and they're trying to get to, they're trying to play for themselves, really. I mean, they're playing for themselves. And now
it's a dangerous spot to be, right?
Right. And here's the other thing. Now they know who their next head coach is, Coach Underwood. So now, those players that are coming back they're playing. They want to prove that, to their new head coach that they can play, that they belong. So, very interesting to see. Looking forward to seeing Illinois in person and kind of see, because they're very fast, they're athletic, and I'm very curious to see how UCF handles that kind of a talent there. Because certainly, I would say that Illinois is probably, I don't count Villanova because that was in November, but since conference play started, Illinois, I would argue, is probably the third, maybe the second or third best talented team that UCF has faced, behind obviously SMU and Cincinnati, for sure. So it's going to be an interesting challenge, I think, for Coach Dawkins and UCF after such an emotional win on the road, digging deep to kind of out of a hole. How much will they have left going into, at home with a short bench against an Illinois team that blew out a pretty good Boise State team at home?
Jamal Walker, by the way, is the interim head coach of Illinois right now. Their top scorer is Malcolm Hill, who's averaging 17 points a game. ESPN, and he's a senior guard from Fairview Heights, Illinois, 6'6" kid. ESPN tended to highlight Maverick Morgan, who's the only other guy who averages double figures for Illinois. 6'10" kid from Springboro, Ohio. He's pretty big, and he averaged just over 10 points a game this year, his senior season. This is the first year he's averaged over double figures. Illinois, when you look at how they did in the Big Ten Conference, they're a pretty good rebounding team. They're actually fifth in the Big Ten in rebounding defense. Every other category, they were kind of middling. They were like 8th, 9th, somewhere around there. But rebounding, they were actually fairly good. They were dead last in block shots. So, which to me is kind of surprising with a 6'10" kid. But not a very good shot blocking team, pretty good rebounding team, which actually echoes UCF in a way, because we know how good UCF has been on the boards this year. But even with Taco Fall, UCF's block shot numbers were fairly low. We talked about this with Taylor Young several weeks back. And it's kind of like, it's like the secret's out, right? You got the 7'6" guy, so we're not going to take it into the lane because that would be stupid. So that's why you don't see that many block shots. They were third from last in the Big Ten in assists as a team, so that tells me that they're having trouble on the point guard spot. And then kind of, like I said, kind of middling in everything else, like 8th, 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th, around there. And so I think that Illinois is a team that can be had on the road if things go the right way. But this is not going to be a cakewalk, especially now you're going to start to feel a little pressure at home. I think with the big crowd, chance to go to the Garden on the line. Johnny Dawkins has been here, by the way, twice. They won the NIT. He won the NIT with Stanford, but this will be a very interesting matchup. I'm extremely excited to see how this is going to shape up. I want to see who's going to match up with Malcolm Hill, if it's Matt Williams or if it's A.J. Davis, and then I want to see how Taco Fall matches up with Maverick Morgan down low. So, what do you think? I'm going to search for the line here, but what do you think about this matchup, at least as of right now? You think this favors UCF, doesn't favor UCF? What are you expecting?
I think it's a toss-up game. I mean, Illinois 20-14 on the season, 14-5 at home, 3-6 on the road, true road games. Now they were 3-3 in neutral. I mean, that's not shocking, but that's the good news. Is I feel like, for example, and the reason why I think that I mentioned that, if this game was at Illinois, I would make Illinois a heavy favorite.
Right now, the line, I'm getting this from something called Sports Chat Palace. Don't ask. It's I've got UCF favored by 2.5.
Yeah, I mean, that's fair. I mean, keep in mind, obviously, usually a home team is favored by 3. So basically, they're respecting their UCF, no question about it. That is fascinating that they would do that. A little bit about Illinois. I want to give you a couple of results here that kind of maybe jumps out to you.
Okay.
Illinois played West Virginia this year, got blown out by 32 up in Brooklyn in that tournament they played. They lost to Florida State in that tournament, 72-61. Those are a couple of the top teams they played out of conference. They beat their rivals, Missouri. Missouri's not very good this year. They got blown out on the road by Maryland, who's an NCAA tournament team. They lost at Indiana by 16. Again, these are road games. You see where I'm going with this,
right?
They got blown out by Purdue by 23 on the road, lost by 9 at Michigan. They lost at Penn State, lost at that's kind of a head scratcher there. Ironically, their best road win was against Northwestern, their in-state rival.
Yeah,
they won at Evanston, but then they got swept by Penn State. They lost at home to Penn State, which was kind of a head scratcher.
That pretty much tells you the story of their season right there. I mean, you beat Northwestern, pretty good team, a team that I think should be in the Sweet 16, and then you lose to a team like Penn State. I mean, what's going on here? No wonder everything kind of imploded on them.
It really did, and so you look at the results, and again, I'm double checking, but outside of Northwestern in Evanston, which is in their own state. They don't win outside of Champaign, which blows me away. They did not win a game on the road. That was the only true road game they won in conference play. So they have not been a very good road team at all this year. It's kind of so my point is, I think I feel like if UCF can jump on them early and get the crowd on their, running, and they have a shot to pull away. So I would make UCF the favorite on that. But certainly Illinois is a talented team that certainly is motivated. And look, a lot on the line with the winner to face TCU at Madison Square Garden, coached by Jamie Dixon, who they knocked off Richmond to get to Madison Square Garden. So should be fun. Should be, this is what where do we rank this game? I mean, obviously it's interesting. Where do you rank this game all time as far as importance here?
This is the most highly anticipated UCF basketball game I can remember since the Florida game at the Amway Center. In terms of the pregame hype. By the way, everybody else has UCF a 3.5-point favorite. Westgate, and it opened at 2. It actually opened at 2.5, went up to 3.5 in a bunch of places.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that's
true. So people are jumping on UCF. Yeah,
well, and I think it's part of because of what I just broke down with Illinois not being a very good road team at all. So I think that's. Yeah, I think that's a fair statement to say. It's the most hyped up game since that Florida game because, even going back to last week's home game against Colorado, that wasn't really that hype. It was like, oh, shucks, that's nice. That's cool. But, yeah, no, people are intrigued. I mean, people want to get to be cool accomplishment if they can get to Madison Square Garden. And now we know this will truly be their last home game, too. So it's not like, well, if this is your last home. No, this is truly your whole last home game. So, hopefully it'll be a great environment. And I know in talking to the players, they definitely thrive on the environment. And keep in mind, Jeff, last week I think their crowd was like 36, 37, 3,800 for Colorado. I was there. It was a very good environment. The people that were in there were loud. And that was in spring break. So I expect students to add to that. And then, I think that the environment should be very good. It's just my only concern is how much does UCF have left in the tank with a quick turnaround after digging deep, after coming from an 18-point deficit to win on the road at Illinois State. Then you fly back, get back, Tuesday morning.
It's going to be an emotional home game with all the fans out there and everything. Yeah.
I think the fans got to help them out a little bit. Got to help them get through some of the, maybe some of the exhaustion that maybe they go through. Kind of like the Cincinnati game a little bit, where I thought they were on E in the tank, but the crowd kind of kept them in it.
Yeah. So again, the tip-off for this game against Illinois. This is in the NIT quarterfinals, set for 7 p.m. TV on ESPN2. Obviously, it will be on 96.9 The Game on the radio. Winner goes to Madison Square Garden in the NIT semifinals to play the winner of TCU.
They'll take on TCU.
Or they will take on TCU. Okay, so TCU won their game against Richmond.
Yep,
so
86-68.
So they will play the Horn. So whoever wins this game plays the Horned Frogs at the Garden. Now, not to be outdone, starting an hour and a half before the UCF men's game, come on out to UCF for a doubleheader because softball has got themselves a big game starting at 5:30 p.m. on Wednesday. Number 1, Florida State coming to town. Eric Lopez, you are Mr. Softball. We all know about that. This is the 7th time that the Knights have faced a top-ranked foe. They've won once. That was against Florida in the NCAA Gainesville Regional back in 2008. It was UCF's actually last time that they met somebody ranked this high. It was number 2 Florida last year. That was the highest.
Well, that's the highest ranked team that's played at the complex prior to tomorrow.
And UCF lost that game 3-1. UCF is coming off a win over a ranked team. They won the 3rd of the 3 against Baylor, 4-2 on Sunday. First win over a ranked opponent this season. Now you get Florida State coming to town. What is the situation over at softball? Can this be done? And what's got to happen for this to happen?
Well, first of all, this will be the first number 1 ranked team to play at the UCF softball complex.
And it will be, and I got word it will be sold out. The game is sold out.
It is sold out, standing room only. There will be fans in the outfield for those that have come to the Florida game. It'll be similar, packed house. And it was funny because someone asked me after the men's basketball game, well, it's like, is that going to hurt the softball attendance? And I said, no. I know because number 1, the softball fan is very loyal, and they will always go to the softball game. And even the fans that go to both softball and basketball, they understand and I've known them. they'll go to the softball game first, and they know they have time to go to the men's basketball game. It's not like, oh, they're going up head to head. There's an hour and a half difference, like you mentioned. So that's not an excuse. In fact, if anything, I think having the men's basketball home game actually helps them to a degree.
I agree with that.
Because I think there will be people that'll swing by there as they wait for the men's basketball game and see how things are going. I've seen that in the past. So
people come straight out of work, come over to campus, come check out softball, and it's almost like, I don't want to, sound, make this sound bad, but it's kind of like you're passing the time before the basketball game starts. Hey, let's check out some softball. Let's grab a hot dog, catch the game. Hey, number one Florida State's in town, and the game will be over in time for us to head over for tip.
No question about it. And let's be honest, there are certain games that transcend for the casual fan, that the casual fan that maybe it's not a softball fan is going to go to that game to check it out, check the product out. Florida game comes to mind. The Florida State game comes to mind. Last year's Alabama game comes to mind. There's certain games on the schedule that will bring out people that normally wouldn't go to a softball game. So you have the number one ranked team in the country for the first time playing at the complex, in-state, a Seminoles team that is loaded. They are legitimate, number one. In my opinion, I think it's the best Florida State team they've ever had on paper. And this is a program that's been to the Women's College World Series many times, going back to when you covered UCF softball with Joanne Graff and the Knowles teams from like the early 2000s that were going to the World Series on a consistent basis. Mm-hmm. This team is loaded. And so for this young Knights team, it'll be a challenge. But the good news, as you mentioned, they played already top 20 teams in the country. They're coming off a win against Baylor, which I thought was critical to this point for the season because, they took their lumps the first two games against Baylor. Baylor is a talented team complete. And for that young team to kind of bounce back and win that game on Sunday, now they know they got over that hurdle and say, you know what, we can beat a top 25 team. We're capable of doing that. And so that'll give them some confidence going into this game. But they're going to have to pitch well. Can't give this Florida State offense free passes. They will kill you. They are a dynamic offense. They're a top 10 offense in the country. And they have tremendous pitching. They got two aces, really. They can throw Jessica Burrows and Megan King, and I wouldn't be surprised either way. So the keys to the game is real simple. UCF's got to hit. When they get runners on base in score position, they've got to deliver. They've got to get those hits, take advantage, because Florida State ain't going to give you a lot of those opportunities. And then on the other side, I think defensively they got to be sharp. Can't give them any free outs and no free passes. And that's keep the ball down and hopefully you get off to a good start. Absolutely, you got to have to make them earn it. That's going to be a key. So I think those are the keys. And look, I mean, this team kind of surprised me because I thought for sure after Friday's game against Baylor where it was a long game and in the Saturday game they lost 5-0. I'm like, ooh. But they bounced back and really played a really good game, shut down Baylor. Aaliyah White was fantastic getting her win there, and the offense came through, and they're hitting the ball pretty well. So they'll be excited. This is not a game you need a speech. This is not a rah-rah game. I mean, everybody, this is games you get up for. This is the games that they come for. And so I think it'll be an electric atmosphere, and I'm looking forward to seeing how it plays out. And what I think is one of the greatest UCF athletic days that I can remember with this doubleheader. I mean, when you really with what's at stake on both at the complex and at the court, it's phenomenal. It's a phenomenal sports day. I don't know why people wouldn't do a doubleheader. I mean, it's a really simple deal. So, very talented team. UCF, as you mentioned, one win all time against the number one ranked team. I was there, the 2008 regional. Mm-hmm. Allison beat number one ranked Florida, pitched a shutout and drove in the game-winning run, and snapped the Florida 44-game winning streak, and it got them within one win of the Super Regional. So that was a significant win. Their other games they played at number one was at Florida in 2009. I think you might have been there with me, I think, in that one. And then
I believe I was. Didn't Florida's head coach get kicked out of that game?
Tim Walton. Yeah,
Tim Walton got tossed, I think. Yeah. I think I remember that. Yeah.
Yeah. So you were there for that one. And then obviously last year's NCAA tournament, Florida was the number one ranked team in the country as well. UCF played them twice there. And then obviously there was a game in Los Angeles in 2011 when UCF played at UCLA that was ranked number one. But this is the first time that they would host a number one ranked team. So that's a nice benchmark moment for the program to host the number one ranked team. But it's a super talented Seminoles team, very well coached with Lonnie Alameda, who's very close friends with Coach Gillespie. Coach Gillespie actually wanted to hire her when she was the head coach at Texas Tech, but Lonnie just didn't work out. But they've been very close. Very talented team. In my opinion, the team to beat for the national championship this year. And it's funny. The two best teams in the country right now reside in the state. It's Florida State and Florida. So
yeah.
It tells you, and we play them both. So hopefully, fans, I would tell them to follow UCF, Knights.com, their instructions. You could still get tickets. You can walk up on game day and kind of wait to see how many tickets are very limited. I think there's some fans that will
standing room, I think, out in that field area, right? Where they have the bleachers.
Yeah. You can get some tickets there, watch games there. People are going to be standing, I'm sure, in the outfield. So it's going to be electric. I would encourage the softball fans that are tuning in to get there a little earlier than normal. Because certainly parking will be interesting, but it'll be fun. It'll be fun, and it's always great to get that environment. And something you talked about a couple weeks ago. It's one of the reasons why the softball complex has to expand, because the demand is there. The fact that we're making announcements, hey, we have suspended ticket sales because we've sold the capacity. Let's expand it. More people want to come. Yeah. So I hope we get to that point in the future. And but it's a big week because you mentioned it. You got Florida State, and then you got conference opening. So it's one last test, the best test, and it'll be fun, and it'll be interesting to see how this young team handles it. Again, I want to emphasize, a lot of these players have never played a big game like this, or played probably in a crowd like they're going to play on Wednesday night. So it's a learning experience. I know it's so cliche, Jeff, but it's so true. A lot of these players haven't experienced this. I spoke to Aaliyah White, the freshman pitcher, after the win against Baylor, and she acknowledged that going through the experience of her pitching against Georgia in a game where they had the lead in the seventh inning and they couldn't hold it, that helped her in the Baylor game on Sunday and helped her close that game out because she had just gone through that experience. You can't teach that. You can't go through that in practice and scrimmages. And that's why Coach Gillespie plays the schedule that she does.
Exactly. A couple notes on Florida State that I want to mention. And obviously, number one in the country. They are and that's in the USA Today NFCA poll. ESPN USA Softball has them number 2. They're 28-1-1. Here's who they've beaten so far this year: Florida A&M, Northwestern, Nebraska, Stanford, Arizona, UCLA. How about that for a trifecta out west? Georgia Tech, UNF, Virginia Tech, Florida Gulf Coast, and Notre Dame. As a team, they are hitting .358. Goodness me. They have a 16-5 edge in the all-time series. This is the first time, like you said, Eric, that these two teams will meet in Orlando since 2013. We know about the disappointment that ensued when they actually knocked us out of the regional a couple years ago. But chance for revenge. I know it's going to be a really tough ask for this really young UCF team, but that's why they play the games. One-game situation. You never know what can happen. So UCF is trying to end a 6-game losing streak against Florida State that goes all the way back to 2011. So
yeah,
and this other note, but by the way, kudos to Nate Blythe for sending this along. UCF has won 3 of the last 4 meetings between these two teams that were held at the UCF softball complex.
Yeah, that's correct.
So we got that going for us, which is nice.
They won the 2011 game. He's obviously referred to there. You mentioned that. That was the last time they win. You mentioned that 2015 regional to tell you how big time flies. Florida State still has about 3/4 of that roster still plays on the Knowles team that was in that 2015 roster, including Jessica Burrows, who was really the MVP of that regional. As contrast, UCF only has 5 kids that played in that regional.
Right.
Brittany Solis, the shortstop, Linnea Goodman, Willow Callanan.
They were youngsters in that series too. I remember.
Yeah, I mean Britt was a sophomore, so was Linnea. Willow was a sophomore. As well on that team. So those 3 right there. Courtney Roden was a freshman at the time, and so was Megan Greenwell. So those were the 5 kids that were in that Tallahassee regional. Greenwell was used as a pinch runner. Roden was more of a pinch hitter and actually started that Sunday regional final game. Goodman and Solis and Callan really were the only three starters that played most of that regional. Whereas Florida State, most of their regulars are back from are still on this team currently. So it tells you how big of a turnover that there has been. But certainly historic. It should be fun. Florida State, UCF have had some memorable games. In fact, I know for a fact that the first ever UCF live radio broadcast of softball took place in the regular season. Took place in Tallahassee, as I was told. I believe it was the 2004. I want to say 3 or 4 was whatever year it was. Took place there in Tallahassee. I remember they had some memorable doubleheader in Orlando in 2005. And I'll give you this quick note. Mm-hmm. The first ever UCF softball game I ever went to was when I was a student, was that 2005 game in in Orlando at the old complex, which you could probably explain better to the audience, was literally next to Jay Bergman Field, right? It was literally next.
Down the hill, right? Yeah.
Yes. So that was the first time I ever went to a softball game, because there was a lot of hype to that game. FSU was a top 5 team in the country. And at the student radio at Nightcast, we had just interviewed some young senior by the name of Stephanie Best, who I got to meet. and there was a lot of buzz about this girl that keeps hitting home runs. So I decided, all right, I'm going to go I will go out to this doubleheader and watched. And I met the voice at the time of UCF softball, a guy by the name of Matt Dunaway, for the first time. I actually met him for the first time ever at that doubleheader. And he's gone on to some good things since then. But that was my first ever softball game. That was the first time I ever went to. So I started going to games after that. So that's why, the Florida State game, obviously I circle that every year for that reason. So, but it proves my point that I mentioned earlier. A lot of people, you never know, a lot of people are going to check out this product and check out UCF softball maybe for the first time on Wednesday night. And you hope that they have a good time and that they'll enjoy what they see in the product and they come back. And I know you'll do your part as the PA guy.
Right.
You're ready.
I will be there for PA. You will be there doing play-by-play.
Yep.
And hopefully, if all goes well, then we'll all kind of trickle on over to the arena for the NIT game.
The plan.
So that should be a lot of fun. So don't forget, folks. Go ahead.
By the way, one last thing too. I was trying to do I did some research on this. Other than UConn women's basketball, which has played at UCF since they joined the American Conference, to my recollection, now granted, I didn't, full details, but this will be only the second program. This will only be the second number 1 team that's played on campus against UCF. Football has never hosted a number 1 ranked team at home. They've been on the road. Same with men's basketball. Bill Beekman, the historian, said they hosted a number 1 ranked team going back to the 80s when they were in Division II or Division III, lower levels. I don't know if baseball has hosted one. Maybe I got to believe they have, but it's probably been a long time. So my point is, very unique situation evening for that standpoint.
This will be a fun one. So softball at 5:30 against number 1 Florida State at the UCF Softball Complex. Basketball, the NIT quarterfinals against Illinois, 7 p.m. at CFE Arena. That game also televised on ESPN2. The softball will be televised on UCFKnights.tv. So as we finish up, we don't even have to talk about what we're going to do tomorrow, because we just told you we'll be there for hopefully both of them, and it should be fun. Eric, I'll catch you at softball.
See you there, bud. Have a good time. We'll see. Have a good time over there.
All right, man. And thanks to you for listening. Remember, follow us at UCF_Banneret on Twitter. Follow me at Jeff_Sharon. Follow Eric at Eric Lopez Elo. Hit us up on Facebook at Black and Gold Banneret, as well as blackandgoldbanneret.com. And subscribe to this podcast on iTunes, SoundCloud, Google Play, and tune in. So for Eric Lopez, I'm Jeff Sharon. We'll be back after this contingency edition with another regular show later this week, so stay tuned on that. But in the meantime, enjoy the games tomorrow. Softball 5:30, basketball at 7. For Eric Lopez, I'm Jeff Sharon. We'll catch you on campus on Wednesday.
Today's episode is brought to you by Cars.com. With over 2 million vehicles and 50,000 more added every day, Cars.com will match you with the perfect car for you, your budget, your life, your style. And if you're ready to say goodbye to your current car, Cars.com will get you an instant offer to cash it in. Just start by entering your license plate and get matched with a local dealer who will write you the check. So whether you're looking to buy or sell, just go to Cars.com. It's magical.